Good morning, everyone. When you get the chance, pop in and say hello. Hi, Susan. Hi, Patty. Arizona and Maryland. Warm day back there. It's been warm here, too. So, it sounds like it's going to be hot where Kristen is, over closer to the coast, too. So, yeah, we've had quite the warm summer with that. Pennsylvania, hello, welcome. In New York, I love it. Gloria. All right. To begin with, I want to share with you from a little over a year ago at my July retreat that I hold out here on by the Monterey Peninsula in a little town called San Juan Bautista. I shared a demo for a block, and Diane was gracious. She heard me mention, something about that I was going on the retreat a couple of weeks ago, and she finished the quilt the block that I was teaching. So I want to share that with you. So she finished that railroad block, and it looks great. She has very different, colors and combinations and stuff, and it's just delightful. So it's fun to see, you may not do any of these things right away, but when you eventually do. So Diane, thank you, if you're on, for sharing and sending that to us. So anyway, speaking of retreats, I had my retreat that I do out here on the West Coast in July, and now I have another one coming up. It seems like it's coming very quickly in Michigan. And so if there's anyone out there that's looking for a retreat to attend, I have one in Michigan near Kalamazoo for anyone in that Midwest area that would like to come. A few years back, a lovely lady from Atlanta joined us from hearing about it on the show. So Lynn's been coming now for quite a while. So if you are interested, email me. My email address is on the screen, and we'll do that. All right, today we are working on the first of the blocks that I want to share with you. As I told you a couple of weeks ago, I was kind of cleaning up, going through things, trying to eliminate some things that I didn't need because I needed space for other things. And a number of the older books and magazines that I've had that I thought that, here's a block that I want to do someday. Well, that someday probably isn't going to come, or it's coming now. So my first in the series that I'm going to do about several blocks with you that I have put off is called it's a Shoofly block, but not really, because it's just a wee bit different. And some of these blocks have several different names, so whatever name that you know it as. But I have this one that I am sharing today, but I've got a little bit of a twist to it, and I'm going to drop down to the table, and we're going to take a look at that. I want to explain a little bit, and then we'll get busy making this block. All right, so I don't know, that looks a little blurry, but that looks worse. Maybe that's a little better, I don't know. Anyway, but this is the block, and again, you may get this block at thequiltshow.com. Go to across the bar at the top to learn, and when you get to learn, find D Saturday Sampler, and it'll say patterns and instructions or templates, whatever, and go to the bottom, and you should be able to find this block. But it's not a hard one to draw out yourself. I'm going to try, just for the sake of it, easiness, and if by some chance you want to use the same fabrics and put it together in a sampler or a table runner or something at the end when you practice and make these blocks, I'm going to make them all 12 inches as best as I can with that. So, but you can change the size of this. This is a, a 3 square is kind of what we call it, because there's 3 across and 3 down. And so if it's a 12-inch block, it needs to be, whatever the sizes are, needs to be divisible. So I am going to work at these at 4-inch blocks. So to get a 12-inch blocks, divided by 3 is 4. And so these blocks need to be 4 inches. So with graph paper, I drew a 4-inch square from that square point to point. And I'm doing this because in a minute I'm going to give you some math to make the block, this section of the block, in a little bit different way than the normal way we're going to do it. And then to get the square, you would go to, if this is a 4-inch block, you would go in, excuse me, 2 inches and 2 inches. And so this is going to be a finished 2-inch block, and unfinished 2.5. And the same thing you would do here. You would cut one square and cut it in half diagonally normally. And you would sew half of the triangle to one side of the block, half of that triangle to the other side of the block, and then this triangle would be sewn here. So, but just to go through that, because as I was explaining it, talking a little bit fast. So to figure out what my dimensions are here, or to draw this in any size that you want to, this block on its own, you're going to, this is 4 inches because this is a 12-inch block. And everything is going to have to be divisible. So you could make an 18-inch block, which is great for a pillow. And so for 18, you would have a 6-inch block. So, whatever you decide. And so on a piece of graph paper, you would have your 4-inch square. I'm going to go back to the dimensions that we have here. So you'd have your 4-inch square, draw your diagonal line from bottom left to top right, or vice versa. Here, you go in 2 inches, down 2 inches, draw that square so it's centered there, and that's going to finish at a 2-inch. And so this is a 2-inch block here, cut in half, which makes for both of these sides. And you would stitch one of those triangles onto this side of the block, and one of these triangles on this side of the block. And then this 4-inch square that you cut and cut in half, you're going to sew half of that to this one, save the other half for over here. All right, that's normally the way that you would tackle that block. Let me just see if anybody has, I'm going to be showing you for the half that is a square between 2 triangles. Yes, I am, Mary. I am going to be showing that in a second, but I wanted everybody to get on the page with me as to what this block was. All right, so that's a question that I saw. So when I sew it the typical way, and as you know, I always do things fairly fast, and I won't always get that point right there. And sometimes these get a little wonky over here, and I do a bit of ripping. I do not know where I learned this method. I've been doing it for a very long time. Whether it's something I noticed I could do, I saw it on another pattern, I do not know where I came up with this, but I've been using it for probably 15, 20 years already. So what you're going to need to create this block, doing it the method that I have, and when I do it this way that I'm going to show you, I always get a perfect point, and these outside edges are right on the money, and I don't have to worry about that mess. And it goes pretty quickly. So the math of it, here is where you might want to grab a pencil and a piece of paper, because whatever size your block is, you need to know what this unfinished size is going to be. So unfinished or finished size, you're going to add a 1/2 inch for seam allowance. So this 2-inch finished block plus 1/2 equals 2.5, and then plus 1 more inch to get a rectangle. So whatever this block is unfinished, add 1 inch to it. It's always going to work. Okay? So I have, for this whole piece, I needed 4 2.5-inch squares, which is right here for the 4 corners. And then I needed a rectangle to make the rest of this block. All right. And so that rectangle was the 2.5 unfinished plus 1 inch. So this rectangle needs to be 2.5 by 3.5. And on your pattern, I've got that there. So you would have, your 4 squares and your 4 rectangles. You're going to sew your square and rectangles together, and then you're going to turn one around like that, and we're going to sew those 2 together through the middle. All right. And let me get to the camera. And of course, you can drop a pin or whatever. All right, now I'm going to go back over to my pressing. But before I press this, you have a space between where the stitch was and where this is. That's where that 1 inch goes. For this to lay flatter, I find it very helpful to go, let me see on camera, it's kind of hard to see, between my 2 stitching lines that went this way. I'm just going to cut a slit up to the sewing, but not through that sewing line. I find that when I press this, it presses flatter. So I'm going to sink my threads on both sides. Then I'm going to open it and press this top part by running my iron across it that way, and this one I'm going to do it's going to go the opposite way. And just for the sake of the back, I'm going to drop it down on the back side to get that nice and flat, and try very hard not to pull on this, because when you're doing this kind of method where one side is, I don't know where my light is the best. Something is going on with the light. Maybe it's because where the sun hits in the summertime. Who knows? But this side is going this way, this side is going that way, and it would be easy for us to pull it as we iron. But try not to do that, because then you're going to mess up your point in the middle where you want to keep those points. Now you have a rectangle, and the easiest way to do that is to find out what this size needs to be is simply, I'm going to move that to the side for a minute, is simply go down, and this is 4.5 by 5.5. Okay, so 4.5 by 5.5. Okay, so I'm going to take that and cut another rectangle, 4.5 by 5.5. I'm going to put those two right sides together when I sew them. But before I sew them, I want to I had to get my ruler. I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to lay this down with my 45-degree line. I got to get some space here. I want my 45-degree line across the top, and I want to hit right here. I don't know how well you're going to be able to see it, but where my seam line crosses here and here, I want to be able to mark it so that I am stitching right across this area. All right, so let me grab a pencil. I'll do it with pencil lead today just so you can see it. All right, and then I'm going to turn it around and do exactly the same thing on the other side. So I want to make sure my 45-degree line is straight across the top. That way I know that I've got it straight all the way through, and I need to move that just a tad. All right, so my sewing line is cutting across right where those seams cross. Okay, this is my seam line. This is where that is. I'm going to sew right just to the left of that, and I'm going to sew just to the right of it that way. So now I put that on top of my rectangle, and because I'm showing you all these things, it's taking a little longer than normal to do this. Now, because I've got so much fabric, I need to pin, I'm going to pin this so that my rectangle is straight across there. And a good pressing, leaving the iron sit and really press that well is going to be very helpful to you when you're sewing this. Now I want to get this side straight, make sure that it's good and flat all the way across, and pin it also here. And let me just make sure there's no questions before I move on. All right, so there, it's not hard to do any of this. And once you know what you're doing, the first one, I would probably agree that it's a little bit on the fiddly side and whatever, but the results are so wonderful. But once you have it down, I can put together a block much quicker this way than I can the other way. So just so that you kind of know that. All right, so now I'm going to sew these up. And I'm sewing on that line that I drew. And I'm going to go down the other side. And then last but not least, you are going to measure a 1/4 inch, put your 1/4 inch line on your sewing line across your what you just sewed. Alright, and then you're going to turn it around and do the same thing. And you're going to notice that you're going to have about an 1/8 of an inch strip left over, and that's trash. And now you have your 2 units. And so I'm going to set my seam. And then I'm going to press it to the large triangle side. And here is where I feel like the magic happens, because that center point is right on the money. So again, pressing that to the back. And again, you have, I mean, you have the point, and there is no, no distortion up there. And I took the liberty of sewing the top row together, and you can see how quickly that comes. And then I want to show you that center block very quickly. It's nothing that you haven't, it's a square and a square. And so this one is 3 3/8, and then you cut 2 other 3 3/8 and cut it in half. We're going to find the center of the sides. And I try to do, and I just give it a kind of a finger press there in the middle, just enough so that I can see it lined up. And then we will sew those onto right sides together, lining up where we pressed it. So thinking. And then the other side. Now I always hold my fingers right along the edge of that so that I can keep that at a 40, it doesn't move to the left or right of me at the end when I'm sewing. And I just keep it right on the side, and that helps considerably. So then back to the ironing. I am setting my seams. I am pressing that to the outside. And now I'm going to do the same thing. So when I look for the center of this, I'm going to line up where the seam line was on each side. Give that center point a good finger press. Line these up so that I do get the center there. And doing the same thing here that I did before, where I find the center. And try not to pull on these. It's very easy to do. when you're straightening them out, but do as little pulling or distorting of the block as you can possibly do. And I know that that gets tough at moments, but once you get in the habit, that's what it becomes, a habit, and then you don't really do it anymore, or very often, let's put it that way. Now, if you laid this correctly and got the center point, when you start sewing and you finish sewing, you're going to finish in that V shape right at the end, which is kind of cool, because you know you're right on the money and you've done a good job of putting that together, which is always nice to know. And then we're going to sew the other side on. So I'm going to line that up. And of course, it can be very, very helpful to drop a pin in. But because I'm not, going much more than a couple of inches in my sewing, I will forego the pin at this point. But anything a little bit bigger, I always get the pins because I do want the accuracy that that brings. All right, then back to the pressing. So I'm going to sink those seams, run my all right, remember that these need to be 4.5 inches unfinished. So I'm going to get my my 4.5, and I'm going to get that by making sure that my 1/4 inch line, I can see that the 1/4 inch line is right at the top of that. The 1/4 inch line is right at the top of that one. In fact, I can probably move that top one a little bit. And that's where good pressing comes in so that you don't miss those. And then I can trim let's see if I didn't quite get through that. It's hard to cut that close to the machine. And then I'm going to turn it around. And now I can put this corner on 4 1/4. And if make sure that 1/4 inch line is right at the top of that side, and this 1/4 inch of a line. And you can see that I'm cutting off a fair amount on both sides. But now I've got my square, and to get that middle row, I am going to sew a 4.5 inch square on either side. Line everything up again. And I'll want to press that. These were pressed, the top row is pressed towards the center. These are going to be pressed towards the outside. Set my seam. Press that. And now I'm going to press that a little bit flatter. Put this one here. Now I'm only going to join, just for the sake of time and stuff, on set my seam, press it to the outside of the block, and now I've got my second row, and now I'm going to put these two together, and you can at least see half the block, and I'm going to butt my seams up with one another, get them aligned. And I haven't shown this for a while on camera, but when I pin, I pin a little bit differently, because one of the things, you know, as I teach my classes and stuff, that, you know, originally we were taught to put a pin on this side and a pin on, you know, to the one to the left, one to the right, and then when we get about here, we're going to need to pull that pin. Well, the pin takes up space in the fabric, and this is when we get that movement right here at our seam line. And I want to keep that there, and so I started one day thinking that if I put my pin in at an angle, 1/8 of an inch over on the top right, coming out 1/8 of an inch on the bottom left, that I could sew and take one stitch over that seam, without pulling any pins and changing where the fabric is laying in there, and that I would end up meeting those four corners a little better and a little bit clearer most of the time. And I have found good success with this pinning method. So the top right, 1/8 of an inch away, 1/8 of an inch coming out on the left side of the seam. So now I can go back and get to the sewing, get that lined up. Make sure it's lined up all the way down. And now when I get close to the seam line, I know you can't probably see it online, but I took one stitch over that seam before I pulled the pin out. And I'm doing the same thing again here, and one stitch over the seam line, pull my pin, and then I'm going to readjust and make sure everything is lined up. And again, I'm holding the side with my finger so that my brain doesn't say that danger's coming, and I can sew without, you know, sewing my finger. I don't get that curve at the end of my seam line, all that good stuff. And so now I have pressed that towards the top. So again, I'm going to set my seams all the way up and down. And as I move my iron along, I'm not really pushing it. I'm lifting it up slightly and setting it back down. And I know you can't see that on camera either. So now I've got, you know, my block 2/3 of the way done. And my intersections come together. My points are on the money. My point here is right there on all, it will be on all four sides. And I get the kind of look that I want to from my work. And so let me see if there's... Carol, thank you for noting that. So, if it does have a block or a section like that, you know how to do it now if this intrigues you. Yeah, Melody, I always get really good okay, let's see if there's... All right. Okay, I don't see any other questions. So, anyway, the Shoofly block and a different way to make those, triangles. I used to call it the triple triangle because there were, 3 triangles in the square. You could add another big one to that. You can do all kinds of things with this. And I think I even, probably still somewhere on the Quilt Show in the Learn section, under my name is probably, I called it triple triangle, but I think I used that method there and taught it at that point in time. So, so next week we will have another block of, ones that I have seen and I've been wanting to do. The other thing about this block, let me drop back down real quick. One other thing about this block is because these corners, using a strong value, when you put these blocks together, this will make a, secondary pattern running across your quilt, which is really kind of wonderful too. So, it's thoughtful on, the color, the value that you place there. And if you wanted to make a whole quilt of this, you're going to have a secondary pattern in that. And so that, I think that's what, ignited me with that, because I saw the secondary pattern in that corner and kind of wanted to do that and make it. It would make a great Christmas quilt too. So if you're interested, I want to very quickly go back. Yeah, Honey Balloon by Moda is what I'm using here. Three Sisters is the who designed it. So next week we'll have another block, and hopefully the weather will cooperate and not be so dreadfully hot across our country. And again, if you are at all interested in attending a retreat at the end of September in Michigan, it's near Kalamazoo. It's just right outside town. And give me an email, and I will see you next week, and have a great one.